should be on there. You haven't read. Here, take this one. Give me that. They're supposed to be the same. Nobody reads them anyways. Okay. What did you cancel it to the 19th? Did you say? Yeah. Of this month? Yes. Next week? No, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah, 11, 19.
2 weeks from now.
Okay.
19.
I'll give this to the girl. Who we missing here? We got Key, Amobian. Where'd Freeman go?
He just stepped out for a second.
About Fusco. There he is. And Hope. Madam Chair, whenever you're ready. Where'd Freeman go?
Did you really? No. Oh, yes. Right. Okay. I'd like to call the Rules Committee to order. We have everyone here except right now for Mr. Freeman. He just stepped out of the room. So everyone but Mr. Freeman is here for the committee. May I have a motion on the minutes from our past meeting? Councilman Hoke approved the minutes. Is there a second? And I have a second from Councilwoman Amobian. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Hearing and seeing none. Great. Okay. We have, let's see. We have on our old agenda an ordinance amending and supplementing Title III, Chapter 31 of the Akron Code of Ordinances to enact Article 3, Neighborhood Advisory Associations. That was brought forward by Councilman Neal. Councilman Neal, is there anything new on this at all?
No, Madam Chair. You know, we have had some discussion. Basically, what's required is to address the issue the law department had with the appointment. But I know I've reached out and made contact with several key neighborhood groups. As I shared, maybe even doing a joint committee so we can move forward. To my understanding, the concern with the committee was the questions that the law department had about the appointment.
Has that been resolved?
No, if the committee hasn't moved on it, I mean, I've stated my position.
Okay.
I think need the law department to maybe define, you know, if there's any further concern. But the challenge is this: the way the legislation is written, I mean, we can't go in and tell a high school who their student council president is going to be, or we can't go into a block club and tell the block club who their block club president is going to be. So I think we have to kind of define when we say appointment. The way it's written, those persons would be submitted to, as recommended, for the Neighborhood Advisory Council that will work with each individual council person. And then, you know, the administration, the way our charter is set right now, would have final approval, but the recommendations would be organic. They would come from the community up, not from the top down.
So what is your pleasure on this, Councilman Neal?
Well, again, as I stated, I think that one piece has to be resolved. The committee, to my understanding, hasn't taken any action to get clarification. I've had some discussions. Remember when I asked us to have a joint meeting so that we can move this ball forward. I mean, we've seen folks come down here. We understand the challenges that we have. We see the different interests from our constituents by getting engaged in everything from the mayor's leadership group to the United Way leadership group to Leadership Akron. And when these folks graduate from that, we have no way of officially engaging them to help us move our communities forward. This just gives us a structure to where we can make sure that we have fair representation throughout our wards. Again, all these folks do is act as advisory groups. They're not, they don't have any other authority outside of just giving insight, a balanced insight from our different wards that we serve.
So what is your pleasure?
Well, my pleasure is to have it passed. If the committee has not done anything to move forward, I mean, I can reach out to the law department. You know, I thought the committee may try to get some questions answered. I think I've reached out to everyone on council. So my pleasure is to have it passed. If the committee hasn't moved on it, isn't ready to take any action on it, it'll continue to sit. It's been sitting for about a year now.
Well, yeah, it has. Any comments from the committee? Okay, then we'll continue to take time. Okay, now we'll go to our new order of business. Councilwoman Mobley.
In addition to continuing to take time, could we decide on, even if we have to do a special meeting or something, just to see if we can resolve the issue? If it's been sitting this long, maybe it's some time for us to do something in terms of clarifying where we are.
I believe what we should do is, personally, I would make a motion that next week we be ready to vote on this. And I think the discussion could happen during committee meetings.
Could we wait a little later?
Wait until after next week. It's been on here for so long, that's fine with me.
I mean, so we could have a meeting where we can have a sit-down discussion?
Next week we won't be here, but it gives us 2 weeks.
No, it's the following week we won't be here. We won't be here the 12th.
Okay, so you're requesting, Councilwoman Amobian, that we look at this,
By the 19th at least.
okay. I don't think that
Right,
should
I
be
know that.
an issue, just not next week is what you're asking for.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So we'll be prepared to have some discussion on that, and I'll remind the committee. All righty, so time on that now, please.
Okay.
Okay, and now we'll go into the new legislation that's brought before rules, and that the first one is an ordinance repealing Title 11, Chapter 110, Business Regulations, Section 110.31, polygraph test of the Akron Codified Ordinances, and declaring an emergency. And I see that we have, I'm trying to think of your Human Resource Director, Mr. Rice is here, Don Rice. You're on.
Yes, to the
wanna-
committee, through the president to the committee. This is, as we were going and doing policy investigations on the use of polygraph tests citywide, we found this piece of legislation, I believe it dates back to the 1960s or 70s, that mandates the use of polygraphs for specific positions and imposes a penalty if they hadn't been, if they were used improperly, okay? What we'd like to do is to have this ordinance repealed so that I can sit down with the department heads and the administrations and come up with a policy for the use of polygraph tests citywide.
And that would then come back before council after you have done your research?
Absolutely.
Okay, would that be correct? And you'll be looking at best practices of
Absolutely.
other human resources?
Absolutely, but this ordinance is a hindrance right now.
Is archaic and
You could use that word.
okay.
Goes
all
back
right.
before I was born, which means it's a long time.
Okay, well, we won't use archaic anymore then. Are there any members of the committee that have questions or concerns? Any members, Councilwoman Amobian?
So you haven't used it, and you think anybody's using it in the country?
Yes, we do use polygraph tests, I think, as in police.
Okay. But I guess this is pertaining to all the employees, or?
I think what we really want to do, Councilwoman,
No, I
through the
mean, what
chair,
does this one?
this piece,
Yes.
it repeals the ordinance that mandates the use of polygraphs in the police department and allows us to develop a policy that we could use enterprise-wide on polygraphs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions from other members of council that are in the chambers? Seeing Councilman Fusco.
Yes, thank you. It just makes sense to update this and to rid ourselves of the old, not allowed to say the word archaic, so I won't say that. But it's just prudent for us to move forward, find best practices, and I know that's what you've been doing in terms of the overall department itself. So I would say we should move forward on this and look forward to seeing newer legislation coming in and updated legislation to come in. So I'd recommend suspension rules with a favorable report.
Just a quick point of reference, I am older than the policy, I had to look and see.
There's been a motion by Councilman Fusco. Okay, and I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Thank you. Are there any against? Hearing and seeing none, this will pass with suspension of the rules. Okay, number one, an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to accept $25,000 in grant funds through the Better Future platform awarded by Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company for promoting safe mobility, inspiring students to reach their full potential, and reducing environmental impact and declaring an emergency. Would that be you, Mr. Rice, one more time?
This is my week. From the chair to the members of the committee, this grant is from the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company that allows us to operate the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, Peacemakers doing business as the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council. This provides us money to do to staff as well as to do the activities associated with the council.
Mr. Rice, who is in charge nowadays? Would that be Myra that's sitting behind you of the Youth Leadership
That would be
Council?
correct. And yes,
Okay.
we have a contract employee who does a lot of the work too.
Okay, all right. And how many do we have on the Youth Leadership Council now? And here comes Myra. I don't know if all of you know, this is, I'm sure you do, it's Myra Snipes. Hi,
Yes.
nice to have you.
Thank you. Currently, we have 120-plus active and alumni members that is participating with our program.
Okay, thank you. And they're actively, that's a nice size.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very
I
much.
would add to that we're actively seeking new members to the
Sure.
council.
Good. All righty, are there any comments or questions from members of the committee? Councilwoman Amobian?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mrs. Snipes. So you're replacing, is it Mr. Billy Soul who used to run this program?
Many of those duties are now under the Director of Human Resources. Many of the responsibilities that used to be under Mr. Soul.
Okay. Do these individuals, do they meet regularly, or how does this work?
Yes, they do meet monthly, working with contract employee Willa Keith, and I also assist her. They do meet monthly. Currently, one of the main projects that we're working on is the team facilitator, financial teen literacy. The deadline for that opportunity for teenagers to lead financial literacy is actually today.
Oh, okay. So they're going to these empowerment centers and,
Yes, that's one of several sites.
oh, okay. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I'd like to have my name added to this piece of legislation, please.
Clerk?
Okay.
Thank you.
Please add Councilwoman Amobian to this. Is there any other council members that have a question? Hearing and seeing none, what is the pleasure on this piece?
Suspend the rules,
Okay.
please.
Did you already make that motion? You've been doing it, but, yeah, I think Councilman Fusco has made a motion for suspension of the rules. Is there a second? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this passes with suspension of the rules. Number 2 has been pulled. Number 3, ordinance amending and supplementing Title III, Administration, Chapter 38, unlawful discrimination of the Akron codified ordinances and declaring an emergency. And Brian Bremer is here to help us through this. Okay, thank you, Brian.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you're aware, the Akron Civil Rights Commission has made kind of an announcement that they're starting to take complaints. And as part of that process, we were rereading the ordinance, and when we were looking through it, one of the things that we noticed was that our definitions, we occasionally had circular definitions, and occasionally we had definitions that were buried elsewhere within the Code of Ordinances. And we wanted to try to clean that up a little bit, to try to clarify exactly what all the terms mean, and also make it so that people could find what the terms mean all in one place, so you don't have to read the whole ordinance to know what the certain terms mean. Also, as part of that, we realized that there was a potential hole in the way we had defined discrimination and discriminate to prohibit people from providing preference to individuals who are veterans. And the reason is that it says that you can't discriminate based on military status. Well, part of that would be if you don't have military status, in theory, you could say that you can't give preference points out, which that was not the intention. Our intention was always to permit people, if they wish to prefer veterans over other people. It's just to make sure veterans don't get discriminated against. And so we put that into the code to try to clarify that issue going forward. And the other issue that has sort of arisen is the idea that we don't want to be in a position where someone brings a claim against, like, say, the state of Ohio or Summit County or another political subdivision of the state of Ohio, that we probably do not have the authority to tell them what to do and how they have their houses. We are not on the same level as the state of Ohio, obviously, and so we don't want to get provoke like a home rule challenge or anything like that. And so that was part of the idea of cleaning these this ordinance up to eliminate the potential claims that would be coming in against, say, Summit County or the state of Ohio itself. So that was really, and to a large extent, all the changes in here.
Thank you, Brian. I certainly understand it because Brian and I had a conversation over it, but I'm opening this up to the committee if you have any questions or concerns. Anyone from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, Councilwoman Sims.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this piece of legislation. Today I had an opportunity to take part in part of the Elevate Akron discussion down at Quaker. Here's what I'm hopeful for, because really what came out of today's discussion, which I might add that Mr. Hardy did a yeoman's job presenting and fielding very difficult questions. You know, we've had this discussion about inclusion and equity, and we still seem like we're chasing that whole hog around the mountain. So I'm hopeful that if we're going to start to deal with polygraphs and pull out old, outdated code, that we really consider how we address defining what those things are. Because it's really hard for us really to see if we're making any strides if we don't have definitions for those. And so I think this is germane to the conversation. I'm glad we're doing that. But it just seems like there's still an element missing, because we have pieces of legislation, as my colleague, Councilman Neal, has reminded us on numerous occasions, that come here that talks about equity, inclusion, and we still don't have a definition for that. So I look forward to the opportunity to work with the law department as well as the administration in defining exactly what that is, so that we can get at that too, so we don't have these kind of dismal reports on the conditions, particularly of African Americans in the city of Akron, and the disenfranchisement related to economic development. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, with this coming in, I would hope that since we've been asking for those definitions, and they do walk hand in hand with this, that we could get some definition on what is equity and what is inclusion. And you know, we've had meetings with the school board, and I know the school board has put in place recently a racial equity policy. Maybe not going into depth with this, but as a city, it would be good if we sit down with them and see what is their definition of some of these terms that we use freely, but you know, we need a true definition of. So, I mean, I appreciate this, but would like to see it address some of the questions we've been asking for some time here, and that have been spoken on today. And I do think it would be good for us to, as a city, to maybe sit down with our colleagues on the school board who have passed or are on the verge of passing. I think they've passed it, and it's implemented, a racial equity policy, and see how they define certain things, so we can all be on one accord. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else? Hearing and seeing none. Brian, what is the wishes?
If we could do suspension of the rules, I believe that would be helpful. We want to make sure that we have these clarifications in place so that people can know what they're required to do under the ordinance as quickly as we possibly can.
And pertaining strictly to this ordinance, obviously.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion for suspension of the rules? I have a motion, Councilman Hope. Do I have a second? I have a second from Councilman Freeman. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will go down for suspension of the rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anything else to come before this committee? Hearing and seeing none, we are adjourned. Were you questioning?
To adjourn it.
Well, you know what, I had some conversations, so I feel more comfortable because of it. Yeah, do. Yeah. Oh, I think it's the language that's in here about polygraph. I think that's what, when I was saying, it sounds rather archaic from what they're saying. It's just the use, the language of when they use it and how they use it has to be cleaned up. Not using it. I'm not. And it doesn't sound like it's been used too much, but I think the way it's been written, we had to clean up how it was written. Okay, that's what. Just like what we just, yeah, just like just now. Anyway. Did you happen to see it on here, what they crossed out? And what they, okay, so.
I did, so it wasn't, it's basically without that clause in there, they can do polygraph to anybody in the city, as long as state, federal, don't keep their.
Right, that's my impression, absolutely. Yes, yes. No, but I could by tonight. I don't know. How they can beat the odds of it by.
Getting her signature, emailing it. She said no, she wanted him to drive it down to get her to sign it.
Oh, no, there's no way she signed it. I bet there's like no way, like. All right, I'll take this. I'm gonna go back to this.
And also, they're doing the recruiting now, the police department. One thing they said is, when you're recruiting good people with good character, you know, you're going to hope, and this, I think, sometimes substantiates their character, you know. I don't even know how long it's been around. I you know, but I think any of us that. Why? That's why I said, you want me to look it up? Yeah. I don't know, but now that you say that, I would be interested. Oh. See, I'm Catholic. I'm going to tell you right now, that's the best thing for telling the truth. And I do it on my knees every night. Yeah, but I mean, you can tell if I'm lying right from the beginning. Every flag is up. I'm horrible at it. I'm horrible, and I tell them myself. Thank you. last one. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, touch Brian, because he helped me understand this. I'm sorry that happened. I was talking to him. I did? Oh, budget and finance. How did you know I was leaving? Because I was slamming everything.
I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. For the record, we have all members present. I need a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting. Motion. All in favor? Nothing on the old agenda. We have one item. This is an ordinance approving and authorizing the expenditure of $10,000 previously designated for My Neighborhood, Our Akron for the purchase of one-year subscriptions of the Balancing Act Pro taxpayer receipt and meeting mode software as approved in Ordinance 100-2018. And I'll allow Mr. Neal to go ahead. I believe this is your piece of legislation.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well, as you read, Council's already approved us putting the budget online. It came with a 30-day free trial. To my understanding, after talking to our president, the reason why we have not exercised that 30-day free trial is because we did not have a purchase order to follow it, in case council decided that we wanted to move forward with this tool to, one, assist us in having an understanding of our city's budget and being able to communicate our different ideas using this as a tool, but also to be able to engage our constituents and give them direct input with us along with the process. So this right here just identifies a funding source so that we can get the 30-day trial, because where we sit right now, by the time we get the information loaded up, we probably won't, as a collective body, get a chance to test it out until we get back from holiday recess, that $15-day recess period that we have. At that time, we'll have a online training, pretty much like the one that the finance department had when they were introduced to the software, where we'll be, as council, we'll be able to come together, be instructed on how the tool works, how we can use it. We'll get our 30 days to test it out, and it really fall right in line with when we go into our budget process. So this here is to identify a funding source. I spoke with Ms. Karen Haig Right now, we sit to where we've used a little less, or right around $10,000 of the $40,000. The My Neighborhood Our Akron grant period ends this Wednesday, although I know some of you, like myself, will probably be having some projects that may run in conjunction with our leaf pickup, because that's a good time to engage our nonprofits and our youth to take advantage of the grant program. But after that, we will probably still have more than the 10,000 left over. And since we're talking about funding sources, as a council, we probably have 3 other funding sources where there'll be money left over. And then if we didn't use those, and those other ones are, if we didn't use the My Neighborhood Our Akron grant, would have dollars potentially left over in our travel budget, as well as if we looked at what we use for our PR with white space. And last but not least, we also have the new budget cycle that's coming up where we could even allocate the dollars. But that's the reason for this piece coming in, so that we can move forward on the getting this software, getting the information loaded so we can go through the trial period, educating ourselves and engaging our constituents to make sure that this is a tool that we want to use that can help us have a solid understanding on our city's finances, and how, if we want to put money in Park and Rec, it has to come from somewhere, how that will impact us. And I don't need to tell any of you, if you've been following the Beacon Journal, you know, it's important for us to have a better understanding of our finances than we do right now. So that's the purpose for the legislation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Ms. Miller-Dawson, anything you'd like to say?
I think I would just like to reiterate what I said earlier, and that is we don't have the staff to support this. So if you do purchase this software, the finance department will not be helping to install or to do anything with it.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Neal.
Well, first let me say this. The company has offered, and if you go back through the information that's been provided to this council over the past year and a half that we've been talking about this, they've offered to assist us with putting this together. But I guess I want to make sure I understand, Ms. Miller-Dawson, you know, here we're looking for a tool to help council understand the city's finances. Every year, every department within the city comes before council for us to approve the budget. We approve the budget, but yet we have no tool by which to enhance our understanding. That's like us saying to the fire department or the police department, or even to the finance department that comes in for new software so that you can do your job better. We're not going to assist you with you doing your job. I want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting what you said, but what I heard you said, you don't have the staff, you wouldn't be doing anything to assist us with this.
That is correct. I mean, we are busy with the approved software that we currently have.
Okay.
We don't have the time or the staff to help implement software that probably won't even be used.
Okay. Well, this is a good thing. The company has put in writing that they would be willing to help us. They sent a software link showing how the information can be installed. And I can tell you, based on my conversation with citizens, I mean, we even had Mr. Milkovich, a constituent from your ward, come down and said they're trying to find out how to budget and how the city's budget works. There are, and I engaged, she's a pastor, I can't remember her name, I engaged some of these citizens. They're willing to help us put this information online. And to tell you the truth, a lot of them, I mean, that's their background. You know, the greatest capital we have in this city is the intellectual capital, and we do not tap into that in any kind of way. These folks have an understanding where they can assist us in helping them. So be that as it may, the good thing is that the company put in writing that they would be willing to help us put this information in, load up the information. The thing is, we just have to start with the trial. And correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Madam President. The reason why we didn't start the trial is because we did not have a designated funding source to create the purchase order that they requested.
Mr. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this $10,000 per year that you're looking for as far as getting this program in?
I believe that is an annual fee. The $10,000 is requested here. The actual program is about $8,500. Just requested 10 because it's been, like I said, a year and a half in case something changed. But again, it's not a commitment once you get it once that you have to stay with it. If we use the tool and after 30 days we find out that it doesn't meet what we want, we wouldn't, there's no obligation for us to go forward with it. But I think if you look at the tools that are out there, and I'd encourage any of the colleagues that happen to be going to the NLC conference in the next week, you get a chance to utilize it then. But then there's also been several emails where links where you could go on and test it from here are there. But to your immediate question, Mr. Hoke, yes, I believe it is an annual fee, but we're not obligated to renew that fee every year.
Yeah. Well, I know you talked about, people asking about this. I have not had one person approach me or come to me or ask about putting this into effect or having anything like this to do. And I'm going back to the fact that you said that there were people that would be willing to help to program this in and get it up and running. I think that's a security question right there. As far as I mean, there's a lot of things that we can't let people just come in and start utilizing and putting programs into our system and opening that up to where they access to it or be able to do something.
You are right. That would be an audit issue.
Yes, and I think that would be major. I think a lot of these things that we're looking at on putting this software in and getting questions in about our budget are online. We've been told that before, that there's a lot of things that are out there. If you go on our website for the City of Akron and you want to find out about different areas as to what's being spent or where it's being budgeted or anything, it's already there.
We also have Ohio Checkbook.
Yes.
That hardly ever gets used by anyone.
Exactly.
But again, it's out there and it's available.
I think this is kind of a redundant idea. I don't think it's necessary. I don't know if there's any other council people other than you and Mr. Milkovich that have had anybody approach them about getting any of this put in there. So I really don't think that it's necessary. On my point, I don't think that, unless I get a big, amount or questions from residents in Ward 6, I don't look to see that this is something that I would want to see come in. I didn't want to see it when it first passed. I don't want to see it now.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments from committee members? Any other comments from any other council people in the chambers?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to answer his questions.
My hand is up.
Linda has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Linda.
Yeah. I don't think we are discussing whether to do this or not. I think that's been approved. We're talking about the funding, and it sounds like the funding has been identified where we can get it from. And it also appears to me that we're talking about having a 30-day period where we are oriented to the software. Now, in terms of long-term, could we not use a student from the University of Akron to perhaps do an internship or something to help us with this? I can only tell you that we use students all the time at my organization. We do get them to sign off on confidentiality and all of those things, and they settle lots of major important projects for us.
I was just going to say, I think our financial system is a little bit more complicated. You can't simply walk in and load it.
I guess what I would like for us to do, since it's already been identified that the company is willing to come in and do this for us, at least for the initial orientation, and then we can decide after a year if we are utilizing it and if we can do it. So we're saying that we can't do, and if the company is willing to come in and do it, I don't understand what the issue would be. Because we're not talking about whether to do it, because we've already approved that. We're talking about the finances of how to pay for this. It sounds like we have one issue on the table.
Mr. Chairman, can
And let me come back to Mr. James so I can go in order.
Sure. So I just want to bring up a couple salient points here. One is that participatory budgeting, which has really been the thrust of the desire for this piece of software, I went and spoke with the head of the participatory budgeting project at South by Southwest last year, and I asked, because I was curious, who else is using it in this capacity? Not one single city has put their entire budget online in this fashion that we're proposing here today, because it's far too great. Of course you're going to have people who call in and say, move the money here or move the money there, even if they do it. We are doing participatory budgeting projects right now. The Akron Parks Challenge is a perfect example. Many of you are involved in that, where we are allowing, this council has allocated funds and resources that community members themselves are dictating how we're going to ultimately spend them. So I think the spirit of this legislation is already in effect, and we can certainly work with council to do more. But probably the most important salient point I want to make is that Section 84 of the city charter says very clearly that the Director of Finance dictates how the records for the city's finance shall be kept and promulgated and communicated. And the mayor fully supports Director Miller-Dawson in our decision that we do not believe we can support this, nor do we think it is necessary in order to make sure we have a full, complete, and transparent budget online and delivered to this council every year.
Are there questions or comments? Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me state this. All the information we're talking about is public information. It's a cloud-based system. A person does not get engaged in our actual software. But every piece of information we're talking about is public information. That's the first thing. Second thing has nothing to do with actually utilizing our software system. It's a cloud-based system. The other thing, this is a tool for council, and it gives us the ability to engage our constituents. The administration has the tools they use. What tools does council have? We get static sheets of paper. Can anyone on council tell me how we're going to cover the $9 million shortfall we had last year? We sold an asset that was bringing in $500,000 a year. Can you tell me how we made up that $500,000? How are we going to cover the $9 million shortfall? That was
There was not a $9 million shortfall last year.
Okay, then why did we have to spend?
I mean, we've had this discussion
Ms.
before.
Dawson, I have the
I've
floor.
already told you
Ms.
you are
Dawson,
incorrect.
Excuse me, I have the floor. I do believe we sold cell towers, and we had to pay a shortfall. That shortfall, in the email that I received, the $9 million, $8 million, whatever it was directly connected to payroll. It was connected to payroll. Now, as council, as a body where everybody comes before us to approve the budget, what tool do we have to understand it? I'm sure all of you on your personal checkbooks go online and look at your check register, look at your investments, your stocks, and you use the technology that they have. Well, my colleague, Mr. Kilby, said he doesn't, but I think we understand because he's sorry, but he's challenged with his cell phone as well. But I mean, I am somewhat stunned and amazed on wanting to kind of like stay in the dark when it comes to understanding our finances. We're talking about using a tool. And if need be, then we won't share it with our constituents. Although in the email that I sent, it had all the cities that were doing that. But council needs the tool to understand. I mean, not just as, I'm also a citizen, not just a representative on this council, and I'm kind of amazed that, you know, we talk about being this progressive city, and then we're still operating in the dark ages when it comes to our finances and how we engage citizens. Now, the information I was told is online in static pages, but it does not allow us as council, because how many times do you hear on council we say, well, where's the money going to come from? Well, I wish we had this money. We're the body that approves the budget. We should have a tool that gives us insight to that. That's what this is. And this is the most difficult thing now, as my colleague has mentioned. We've approved the legislation to do this. The only thing missing was a funding source. Now the funding source comes in, we still get the 30-day trial for us to take a look at it and see if we can utilize it, see if it's a tool. No one's asking us to use something that isn't a good tool. Now there's a difference to it being a good tool and then us just denying and not using it. But then I think each one of us have to be able to address our constituents when it comes to the budget. We've got Mr. Nome that comes down here every time and asks about the finances and how the finances impact our city's budget.
I'm probably going to have to invoke
okay, well,
5 minutes.
I'm just...
Okay, Mr.
Go ahead, Mr.
You can go to him first.
Please.
So I just want to say a few things. So what council decides to do on this particular piece of legislation on a tool that it wants to use is certainly its prerogative. But I've been here almost 3 years, and I'm here to tell you that Diane Miller Dawson is one of the finest public servants the city will ever see, has ever seen, and it is a privilege to work with her. She is honest, she is open, she has worked with every single member of this body. To insinuate that somehow we don't share 100% of the public record of the finance of this city is absolutely false. This council, every year and upon request, gets any piece of information it wants. It can also go directly to the website and get it online. Just the other day, I had a council member ask me about a capital budget question. I didn't know the answer. I looked it up online, found the line item, and was able to answer it. I've only been here 3 years. Many of you have been here longer than I have. I'm not saying I'm a budget expert, but I know enough about the city budget to be able to read and understand and interpret the facts and figures and the static pages, as you say, Councilman, to make decisions in terms of how best to govern this city. I think most city council members would say that they get that. But I just want to say 100% that there's no dark ages. We put everything online. We participated fully in the checkbook online, which the state auditor of a different party instituted. Everything is out there. Anyone can come down and take a look. So I reject wholeheartedly the notion that somehow this council or this city or this citizenry is in the dark about our city's finances. We get audited by the state every year. Those audits are public. They are online. They can be read at your leisure. So I don't know what else can be done, but we are here always to give you the information. It is out there. It's not like we're hiding anything. It's out there fully to this council, to the citizens who live in this city, and to anyone else who is interested in learning about how this city works from a financial perspective. It is all there in plain English.
Ms. Somerville?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to get back to the issue again as to who would be inputting the information, as we've gotten some new information on today that the administration is kind of stretched and they don't have the individuals who can help do this. I know that there is a link that will be provided to Sarah or to Holly, but also just kind of want to make it very clear, Sarah and Holly are not in a position at this moment to take on the responsibilities either. So Councilman Neal, we have to be very clear about how are we going to implement the program or the software. I think the idea of the software could be great, but it seems that we hadn't had an understanding as to who would be implementing this software. And so that's the only thing. I just want to make it clear that Sarah and Holly can't take on any more than what they're doing currently as well.
Mr. Moby.
Excuse me. Mr. Hardy, with all due respect, I really interject the comment that you made. No one has ever questioned Mrs. Miller Dawson's integrity or her skills or anything of that nature. And to imply that this is what this is about is totally out of line. No one has ever questioned that. You know, I have gone to Mrs. Miller Dawson for years now and gotten information. I trust what she says. I don't even think this tool is about that. It's about self-educating and becoming aware of how it works. And I can't tell you, as long as I've been down here, I can't tell you everything about the budget myself. But I can certainly tell you any tool that we can use that would better help us understand and how to move dollars around. But no one is questioning her integrity at all, and her skill level, her staff, or anybody. So I really reject that, and I find it disingenuous to even put that in the minutes. Okay? Thank you.
Ms. Sims.
So I guess I'm just surprised and not really following. I thought we passed the legislation. I thought the only issue was where the money was coming from. In fact, so much so, I would have thought if all of this was real issue, we would have had a discussion at the time we're debating the legislation. And so I'm just asking the question.
I will answer that, because when this came up before, I did indicate that I did not have the staff to help install anything. So it was said, and go back and check the tapes, I did say that at that time.
So with all due respect, this council still passed the legislation. So the question still becomes, I thought we were just talking about where the resource was coming from to pay for the piece that this body passed. Am I incorrect?
No, I don't think, here's the problem I have. It's real clear that finance right now doesn't have the manpower. I'm hesitant, you know, we did it the last time, but I'm just hesitant if it's a tool that they say, look, we're not going to use it. I don't think this body has the right to tell them, oh, yes, you are. I don't believe we have that right by charter, by our rules, any more than I have a right to go to the snow plowing and say, now you're going to use GMCs, not Fords. We don't have that. We can pass it, and we can find an identifying funding source. I know I don't want to be stuck under the rock of, well, we passed it and we bought it. Well, doesn't it look nice sitting there? I don't want to be a part of that, to purchase something that clearly they don't have the manpower to use right now. But you're right, we did. We passed the legislation, but that legislation does not impose upon the finance department to use the product.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Again, this tool is not for the finance department. This tool is for those of us on council. Council approves the budget of the whole city. We have no way of seeing if we make a choice to pull money from one way, how it impacts something else. We have no way of projecting. Maybe I missed a meeting with council, but council, we should be working lockstep with the administration on how do we grow our city's reserves.
Right. So
this
is a council project, there still has to be somebody to input it. You're saying that Sarah and...
The company said that they would assist us, and it's all documented, it's in emails. The company sent emails saying that they would input the information for us.
So I guess, Ms. Miller-Dawson, what we're hearing today is, I don't want to say out of the loop, because that has a negative connotation, but if this is something that was done, it would be done...
Without our support.
Right. No, well, I'm honestly, myself, I know I'm not comfortable with putting it on you. I don't think I hear the president saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't...
Well, I think Mr. Neal, at this point, I mean, you got to identify how this software is going to be implemented. Who's going to input the information? I think that onus is on you as the sponsor of this piece at this point.
I think I've said it once, I said it twice, I'll say it 3 times. It's in the email that the company sent back to us. They are willing to input the information for us. You know, again, folks, a 30-day trial for us to use a tool. Absent of Ms. Dawson, and maybe Mr. Hardy can answer this question, but of members of council, those of us that approve the city's budget, I'm going back to that question because it's an important one. And if you've been reading the paper and the things that have been written in the paper, last year we sold an asset, brought in $11 million. We had to use 6, 7 of it to pay off a shortfall. How are we going to cover that this year? Can you tell me, we now are short $500,000 every year that comes in because that asset brought that money in. Can you tell me how we made up the shortfall for where that money went? I'm just asking. We should have some understanding. We should be able to forecast how we're going to walk hand in hand with the administration to address growing our reserves. Can you tell me, anyone on council, can you tell me how we're going to do that? And what tool do we have? And then where do those monies go?
I'd like to call the question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, because we've already voted on the legislation. We passed to utilize the tool.
Mr. Fusco has had his hand up here. Are you on?
Is this on now?
Yeah, you're on.
I think one way of answering that question is, which is something new, is the $15 million that we're collecting over and above in terms of issue 4. I think that's going to help fill that gap, that $500,000 gap. I believe budgetarily that certainly will do that. The other side of this is that we've been talking about this a lot. This comes, and Mr. Neal, you got it handed to him in terms of, being persistent, but the administration is not going to, they didn't budget the time, don't have the time right now in terms of this. We're still reeling, really, if you think about it, in terms of the downturn in the economy. Many departments are still, we just talked about the animal control last week, 2 weeks ago. They're still reeling from this. We still haven't gotten back to where we were before. Our finance department, they win an award practically every year, if not every year, in terms of reporting the budget. How many hours do we spend as a council in terms of reviewing both the capital and the operating budget? We spend hour upon hour upon hour. I agree in terms of calling the question. I'm not on the committee, but I agree with that.
You want to hear from anyone else?
When you call the question, I think that ends our discussion.
I'm sorry.
I called the question and you allow Mr. Fusco, so that should end.
He had his hand up.
Yeah, so that should end debate. We'll have to vote on that.
Okay, all in favor of passing this along to our group tonight, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Nay. All right. We're going to report that out. Let me say this before we close. I think what I hear is, this is, even though it is a part of what you do, this is kind of out of your bailiwick, what we've been talking about.
Yes, because again, we have official financial software that we use and that we support.
Right. And then I see Mr. Neal saying, well, let this be a function of council then. So I think my challenge would probably be, because I know if these folks are going to come in and input data, I know they're going to be knocking on somebody's door. They've got to at some time or another. But my challenge would be some kind of plan where if it is something that council, because that's what you and I had a conversation about, if council uses it as our tool, there really does have to be a definitive plan of, okay, who puts in the numbers and who, you know, Mr. Neal, you're not going to do it, I'm not going to do it, but who will head the project up? It sounds like at this point you're saying, this is a council project. And then, you know, come back to President Somerville and say, is this something that we can do with existing staff or, and I agree, the numbers are out there. The numbers are out there. Getting to the numbers sometimes, I know I've even had a challenge, or sometimes, where does this come from and what do we do there? I think this simplifies that, but, well, we'll report that out this evening. Any other thing to come before our council committee? If not, we are dismissed. Thank you.